I want to thank you for allowing me to come here. I was here back in February, first time in Sacramento, with part of Mark Weatherford's Learning Series. And when Mark departed and Keith asked if U.S. CERT, and specifically if I would come and talk to you folks, I happily came because I'm a big believer that to build relationships, you start person to person, but to maintain relationship, you have to go organization to organization. And I wanted to make sure that just because a strong personality, not only here in the state, but nationally left, didn't mean that U.S. CERT wasn't going to be a partner in cybersecurity with the state of California. Granted, we've got new faces. When I was here back in February, I was still the acting director. So things have changed. But I just wanted to know, just because positions change, people change, the organizations will still exist and share information. And so I'm happy to be back in sunny Sacramento. Actually, it was almost as cool this morning as it was back in D.C. So it felt like a little bit like home, except for the jet lag, which I'm still fighting a little bit. So thanks again. I hate bios, so it was just way too long. So we'll move this forward, because I know y'all will have lots of questions. I got some before we even got started. I've already gotten a lot of good questions this morning. So we'll talk a little bit about U.S. CERT. We'll talk about the threat landscape, and then the one thing that is on everybody's soapbox is we're not doing this alone. We as in U.S. CERT, we as in the federal government, we as state governments, we as people, we as corporations don't do this alone. Now, one thing I will say is I hope that a lot of the things that I talk to you about today aren't going to be shocking and new to you, because the concepts I will talk about today, okay, are not anything that anybody that deals with cybersecurity or cyber infrastructure or information assurance hasn't seen or heard, which is a good thing. But as we'll find out, that the bad guys know that, and they keep pinging away at the same things over and over. Where does U.S. CERT sit? I won't take too long on this. We are part of DHS's, out of their headquarters element, their National Protection and Programs Directorate. Other organizations in there that you have heard of is U.S. Visit, the Federal Protective Service. There's other organizations that deal with protection of a lot of the physical infrastructure protection. There's an assistant secretary that handles that, which is more the physical side of securing our critical infrastructure, which I'll show you the 18 sectors here in a bit. But I really want to let you know that these organizations, it doesn't show well on that, the three organizations below cybersecurity and communications, where many of you may have actually interacted with, the National Communication System is a presidentially mandated organization built back in the 70s that is part of the stand-up of the NSTAC. Their whole purpose is the resiliency of communications, telecommunications, GPS, any of the communications that you have whenever a national event happens, whether it's a natural disaster or the president or a GX summit occurs, the NCS is there to ensure the resiliency of that communication. The other group bookending that is the Office of Emergency Communications. They're similar to NCS, except for the fact of their role in life is to ensure that the integration of communications for first responders. How does the military talk with law enforcement, talk with medical services? It's not about getting cell towers up like NCS's job is. It's about allowing people, when there is no cell tower, when there is no terrestrial line, to be able to communicate to get the right people to the right place. And they help that integration. And then there's the National Cybersecurity Division, which has a little bit broader spectrum than both of those, in the sense that they work with state and local, and that's part of the critical infrastructure, cyber protection and awareness. They work with international, We do all of our public outreach through that group. The the network security deployment builds all the tools. How many in here have heard of Einstein? Okay, good number. That's part of our National Cybersecurity Protection System. Einstein is the sensor, but because that's the most familiar term, that's the piece of the NCPS that's been around the longest, most people have heard of that. They're the team that develops and the engineers, develops, implements, and maintains that system, as well as our mission operating environment, US CERT's mission operating environment, affectionately called the MO, which is the uscert.gov network and where the sensors tie back. Federal network security, I know all of you have heard FISMA, Cyberscope, continuous monitoring, the Information Systems Security Line of Business, Trusted Internet Connection Initiative. They own and manage all of that. That's probably our closest partner in day-to-day operations, because what they learn about departments and agencies, we can use as we develop mitigation strategies at US CERT based on a current threat. And what we direct departments and agencies do, they can go back and inspect to see if those things are being maintained. Global cybersecurity management is dealing with, working with NIST. There's the NICE program, which is the education, the information security, cybersecurity education, not only of improving the workforce, but training and educating the populace, whether it's making students in our elementary and high schools aware to setting up centers of academic excellence for training cybersecurity professionals of the future. They also do supply chain risk management, software assurance, and other best practices. Also with FNS, they work a lot of the relationships with NIST as well, so a lot of the standards and practices like SCAP, IPv6, and others, they coordinate and work with NIST on that. So US CERT is the primary operational arm of NCSD all the way up to NPPD. But here's the catch. We are not FEMA, TSA, Coast Guard, Secret Service, which are operational components of DHS. We're part of the headquarters element. There is policy as well as a bottoms-up review within DHS that could move that to make us more of an operational component, not just US CERT, all of this function here as part of an operational component of DHS, which will help in a lot of things and a lot of the struggles that we have, and many of you have at your level with authorities and things like that. Our mission, pretty straightforward. If you look at what any other computer incident response team, computer emergency response team, etc. does, we analyze data, we look at ongoing activities, we provide mitigation strategies to stop what's going on now or assist in doing that, as well as hopefully prevent. So US CERT's number one purpose in life is to share information. Yes, we do analysis, but we do it to share information. We do incident response, whether it's locally or on site with the organization. That involves sharing information. So if anybody asks me what I do as the director, I ensure we share information. Now, are we efficient at it? We're learning, we're growing, we're improving every day. Things like this help. One of the things that has come up in many discussions is access to the government form of incident response and security teams, the portal we have, GFirst, even though that's limited at the state level. Having that ability to do that, that's inherent in every bit of this that we do. We have to share information, but that information sharing is a two-way street, which is our biggest challenge. We're better at going out, but we haven't found a lot of people good at coming back. Everybody wants information, but they don't necessarily want to give up information about where they've had risks or events and other things. So the challenge that we have, I know private industry has, I know state and locals have, we have it across the same challenges. How we share information, non-attributively, but we're able to get the information out so people can hopefully prevent that type of activity. And everybody's heard predictive analysis. Well, we're not statisticians. We're techies, just like Matt asked earlier today. But if we can take an incident, create indications and warnings, and send that to someone else who hadn't been affected, we have been preventative and somewhat predictive. Okay, so, but the only way to do that is we have to know what activity has happened over here. If we can get access to malware that we can do reverse engineering on, then we're able to get more indicators out and share back not only with the information provider, but to others. Talk to a lot of different people. The challenge we're having right now is helping scope. U.S. CERT started as truly a government CERT back when they were called Fed CERT, back in the mid to late 90s. They were part of the General Services Administration, GSA. And when someone asked, hey, what's the government look like from a information security or information assurance perspective? Well, no phone calls, no email. We're good to go. Everything's rocking. Well, we know that's not true. So we have grown from a government CERT to a national CERT. And there are challenges with that because the expectation of being a national CERT is much broader than the capabilities we have grown to date. But we're getting more people. We're getting more capability. I mentioned NCPS. We've been around for over 5 years. We are still doing analysis manually. I am just now going through the process of implementing and going through an operational test and evaluation for a correlation tool. 5 years old, national CERT, we're just now getting a correlation tool. So I understand your challenges. We work nationally, internationally. We work with the major cybersecurity centers as outlined in the Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative with the Intel community, the DoD, FBI, et cetera, both from a Intel learning perspective as well as an operational. U.S. CERT is not investigative, we're not regulatory, and we're not law enforcement. So when we get information, we can't call the cops on you, we can't do an audit of you, and we're not going to tell the spooks about you. We may use the indicators to help work with the Intel community. We will work with the informing organization to say, you really need to call law enforcement. Now, if they call CHP or they call FBI or Secret Service, that's really up to the organization, and we will help them get to the right people. I have Secret Service and FBI as liaisons sitting with us, as well as NSA and the U.S. Cyber Command has liaison officers sitting in my space to be able to provide additional assistance where it's needed. So with the establishment of the National Response Plan and the National Response Framework, which was more geared to critical infrastructure and more physical, there was never really an aspect of how the federal government was to handle cyber when you had the emergency support functions. There's 15 of them. ESF2 deals with communications handled by the NCS, as I mentioned earlier, how we handle cyber. So let's look at Katrina. You had a lot of non-governmental organizations going into a spot that was devastated, creating networks to do their mission, do their business, but to do that, they were getting medical information. They were getting other personally identifiable information about citizens of New Orleans. How was that being secured? It wasn't, because the idea was get up, get running, get information flowing, we got to communicate, we got to share information, we got to get records to and from people. How do we do that? Security was a secondary concern. They wrote an annex to the National Response Framework, the National Response Plan, but we did not have a way of handling a large-scale cyber event. Now, if anybody in this room can tell me what a large-scale cyber event is, come to D.C., let's write it out so we can get this to the right people, because nobody has been able to define that, because they talk about a cyber Pearl Harbor, cyber 9/11, cyber Katrina. If you look at all the stuff we're dealing with day in and day out, we've already surpassed that. The difference between those things is those were a single major event at a single point in time at a single place. Cybersecurity doesn't work that way. We're losing information every day, and it's not limited to the federal government. Look at Google, okay? They lost... organizations are losing intellectual property. Some of it's for financial gain. Some of it is military and national security. Some of it is so I don't have to do research on how this organization got this type of capability. And I want that capability. I don't have to research it. The other is look at the major governmental summits, the G8, the G20, the International Monetary Fund, all those things. They're getting information about what our U.S. and other countries' position, so when they can sit across the table, they can go, I already know if I start here, I already know what their argument's going to be. So there's a lot of reasons. So we've been fighting cyber activity for a while. And so we needed a plan on how we can, as a nation, escalate and get. So the National Cyber Incident Response Plan was started a year ago. We're in an interim draft we just tested as part of the Cyberstorm 3 exercise that occurred 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks now, and last week in September. And we looked at how we can escalate and do things on a large scale as it relates to cyber. Effects of the internet, effects with federal government, state and local, industry, etc., and how industry comes together to do that. And industry was part of the development of this plan, as well as interagency cooperation. I can't speak to, at the state and local level, who participated. I do know that Will Pelgrin from the multi-state ISAC participated, but how it was filtered down and coordinated at each of the individual state governments, I can't speak to, but I know the goal is, when this thing is finalized, it does have input from all sectors and all groups of interest, whether it's owner-operators or those that could be affected. So another thing that started about a year ago is the National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center. So back when, in 2007, when I came to DHS from the DoD, I was familiar with NCS because when I worked at the Defense Information Systems Agency at DISA, the director of DISA was the manager of the NCS, and they were at the same place as the headquarters of DISA. Then DHS stood up. They decided the better place for NCS is to move it to DHS. So they stayed there, U.S. CERT. They were in different buildings, but they were communicating. They moved NCS to the same building, but we were in different rooms. We were working at the TSSCI level. They were working at the secret level. We were down the hall. Well, as organizations and operations and missions mature, sometimes breathing the same air creates communications that wouldn't happen if you have to get up and walk down the hall. Okay? So there are 4 primary components in the NKIC, as we affectionately call it. You have the NCS, or the NCC, which is the National Communications Coordination Center. You have the Industrial Control Systems CERT that focuses on control systems, SCADA systems, things like that. Stuxnet, that's the bane of their existence right now. You have DHS's Intelligence and Analysis Group and U.S. CERT. Those are the 4 primary organizations, but the idea is to bring in the various Information Sharing and Analysis Center, whether it's from the IT sector, the comm sector. We want to look at bringing departments and agencies. Right now we can seat 60 people, but we want to expand and bring more information resources into a common place to be able to help give the secretary a better understanding of the cyber footprint so she can report back to the president and other senior leadership in government about what's happening across the country. And it's actually in a TSSCI facility in D.C. in the same building. We just basically took a smaller one portion of our floor that was already skiffed and expanded it to the whole floor. So it takes up about half of a floor in the building we're in D.C. Nobody has ubiquitous resources. So one of the things that we've looked at partnering and we are partnering with is the multi-state ISAC. How many people have heard of the MS-ISAC? I know a few of you have. Great, that's good. They are growing. They are now a not-for-profit.org. Will Pelgrin is the director of that organization. DHS pays them a decent amount of money to be able to provide services, some managed security services. At least for 1 year, they got a small earmark to be able to do that for a series of state and local governments. I believe they chose 18 state and local governments that can provide service. Other than that, they are a fee-for-service organization. But their idea and their purpose is to be similar to what U.S. CERT is for the federal and critical infrastructure at the state and local level. So they will provide incident response where they're resourced, or they'll request assistance from us. They are our primary interface with the state and local governments. Now, if Keith called me up and said, "Hey, we're having a major problem and we need U.S. CERT assistance," I'm not going to go, "Nah, you need to call Will." I'll say, "Tell me what you need. If I have it, I'll get it." But I will loop in Will so he's part of the process. We are not going to dump everything to them because we're still here to provide help and resources. One of the things that has been talked about, as mentioned, is G-First. The CIO's office has 5 tokens because it's 2-factor authentication required to get into the G-First compartment as part of the U.S. CERT portal, and we're trying to figure out ways to expand that. The problem is, just in the federal government, we have close to between 2,000 and 3,000 participants. Managing that number of people with tokens becomes daunting. I mean, I'll pick on Mark since he's not here. When Mark left from here and went to his new job, because his new job could get access to the G-First, he took his token with him. That doesn't mean California got one less. We just have to now manage getting a new token over here so the 5 individuals can still have access to that. Getting more, we're going to. I talked about some ways, and you and I need to talk. So you know what you got volunteered for by your folks. Is how we can possibly do more of that. But understand the tokens aren't free. They are free to you. The service, the access to is all free, and then but then we have to manage it. We have to have points of contact that can adequately manage who gets access based on usage and everything like that, so we can maintain. The reason it's popular is because it is a vetted audience, and analysts can get there and talk about stuff that would be sensitive if you expose it out to a broader group. So that's the purpose. We want to keep it vetted like that. We are looking at improving the portal. I'll be the first to say I don't like it. It's a great resource, but it's cumbersome. The GUI sucks. Matt can attest to that. We've already talked about it this morning. But the idea is some things are hard to find, but it is a good way to reach out to analysts, and even security managers to security managers to be able to share information and get a good way. One of the things we do is, aside with the G-First portal, is a conference once a year. This year it was in San Antonio. Next year it'll be in Nashville. But it's the G-First conference. We had almost 1,400 people this year. We had Howard Schmidt, the National Cybersecurity Coordinator. We had Dave Cullinane from eBay. We had Brad Arkin from Adobe. We had, my name just went blank, from the CISO from IBM. So we've had a lot of key people come and be keynotes there. But the idea is it's analysts talking to analysts, learning about things that are going on. We had a ZeusBot training course, 2-day training course, standing room only. It was quite helpful. And if anybody went to that, I'd be happy for your feedback, but it was popular. So we do use that as a way to share, another way to share information. The MS ISAC co-hosted with us this year, and they actually hosted their annual conference at the same time. So that partnership is strong and growing and will continue to grow. One of the things we've done through DHS, and this isn't a U.S. cert, it's NCSD, but part of the National Association of State CIOs, we're working to get CIO security clearances. The challenge is we got great information. Unfortunately, some of our partners, for legitimate reasons, have stuff that we would like to share at the secret and above level. And so having the ability for a CIO to go to a place like the State Fusion Center and sit down at a terminal where they can get secret documentation and be able to get a better understanding of why we're putting out information the way we're putting it out and why it needs to be executed in a certain way is a great capability. Trying to do more of that, but it takes time. There's paperwork involved. There's security clearance reviews, which if any of you've gone through that, know it's not just a short duration thing. So, but it is something DHS is trying to help the state CIOs and CISOs become more aware of the environment and the threat. So let's talk a little bit about the threat. The number one inroad to networks today is what? Can anybody tell me? I don't have any cool gifts to give out, but can anybody tell me what the number one inroad is into our networks? Facebook. Email. I got one email. Anybody else? Okay, good. Email is the number one. Why? Because the bad guy's gotten really good at phishing. The other is redirects. Okay, and a lot of that's because you get the email. We have seen email where the bad guy has actually gotten email, an actual email, repurposed it by adding an attachment that had malicious code, whether it's an Adobe PDF or added a link, and resent it back to the people that it was originally intended to, plus a few others. And guess what? You can't tell it's been spoofed because it looks like there's no misspellings. It's not a bad joke from somebody that you would normally not get a bad joke from. When I say bad, I don't mean it's a poor joke. It's in poor taste. And so the thing is, the getting in part of that diagram is getting better. They're able to do that. Insider is still big. Thumb drives, I chuckle because even this morning when we were all sharing, groups of us were sharing information, whether it's the multi-gig small hard drive to the thumb drive, just passing them around. We got to do business, okay? The bad guy knows what we do. We got to do business. And, there are organizations that say no thumb drives. Well, there's an operational impact. There's a risk management decision that has to be made by somebody, and that's the challenge. Weak configuration. You think patching is a problem still? For Conficker, the patch problem was Microsoft 0867. There were two or three different events associated with that vulnerability released by Microsoft and patch. Conficker happened almost 6 to 8 months after the patch was released. And other things had occurred further beyond than that. Okay? So if you look at the challenges we have, patching is still something that you got to consider. It's not easy. With some of the recent Adobe issues, we got a question from one of the departments going, okay, do they have an enterprise patch for this? Something that I can push once. Well, the way Adobe did, it was actually an update to Reader. It wasn't a patch to Reader. So they had to individually, there's an individual process. So it's not an easy process. So maintaining strong configuration, whether it's through good auditing, good log management, and knowing what's out there and keeping it up to date is critical. So obviously they get in, they do something, they stay in. Botnets go to sleep, waiting for command and control. You've got other things that have to do. And really what it comes down to is that center dot. Okay, if you have, how many in here, and this is, I'll leave this as rhetorical, but how many in here can say when Microsoft Tuesday comes out, and this last Microsoft event, they produced the most patches than they ever have in any Tuesday release. The most. How many of those could anybody in this room say, everyone affected me at the level Microsoft said they were at? That's the problem. Now, from my level, from an enterprise, federal enterprise level, and that's where federal network security, as what they do, if I understand the assets that are in the federal government, I can write mitigation strategies, say, you really need to patch this today. Or, hey, you need to patch this as part of your normal patching sequence because, it's not severe based on and I can tailor it to the department or agency. So understanding that baseline, asset management, is very important. And, at the state level, U.S. CERT isn't going to be directing mitigation at the state. That's going to be, folks like your CISO, your CIOs, those guys are going to be based on, the relationship and authorities. I understand all that. Will be how that gets permeated and enforced. But those are the things that we got to understand how we function so somebody can make that risk management decision. Two things you'll hear me talk about today. One is information sharing. I'll probably say that more than anything. And the second is risk management. Cybersecurity is all about risk management. That's really the underlying theme of cybersecurity. It's about risk management. Understanding what you have and implementing the right resources to minimize mission impact and loss of critical information. Targets and who's doing it. The top two speak for themselves. Russian Business Network, pick a country that's nation state. There are, for those that can look at the National Intelligence Estimate, there are countries that are clearly inherently have capability. There are countries that are on lists that probably outsource the capability. But they're low on the list because they don't have it inherent. But they still have the capability. We still have to look out for them. The cyber terrorists, pretty self-explanatory. The hacktivists. If you look at Estonia back in 2007, you will see that a lot of that, though it was probably supported or you could probably put some ties to nation state, it was probably more hacktivist, somebody trying to do their, push their cause as much as it was somebody trying to do harm. So, it's a wide variety. Intellectual property, those cyber targets aren't in order of precedence or anything or severity, but intellectual property, crime and monetary reward are always critical. Now, denial of service, the bad guy wants information. If he does a denial of service, how's he going to get the information? So denial of services are used whenever you want to minimize activity or information sharing. So let's go back to the first responders. Let's go back to those kind of things. If you want to stop activity between law enforcement being able to do something, use a denial of service. Otherwise, they're wanting the information just like people that have a legitimate need for the information want it. Where do we want to get? Everybody's heard about the OODA loop. Everybody's heard about different things. The more we can be to the left and understanding how to minimize that to prevent everything to the right, the better we are. And that goes back to information sharing. Now, if I have information that can help you minimize or use the information at the left to prevent what's happening at the damage and track coverage stage, then I need to get that to you. Okay? And if you have information that your partners have, you need to get that to them kind of thing. So really we want to do is to be able to execute better security policies, to be able to do those things down at the bottom right. We've got to be able to understand what's happening there, and that's all about information sharing and having the right pieces and parts to get that to the right people to be able to do that. So if we go back to that original diagram, to minimize that effect, anything that we can do to shrink any one of those three, preferably all three, but if you shrink the first one, the get in, you will definitely, obviously, minimize the other two. So if you focus on better security practices, better, whether it's sharing, keeping things at a DMZ, whether it's, any of the best security practices you hear by NIST, by the security practitioners, whether it's a Symantec, a McAfee, an IBM, etc., or academic researchers, using those things that best security practice that will allow you to do your mission and do your function and still maintain security, you will always start shrinking that get-in phase. Will you eliminate it? No. The bad guy knows we use web. They know we use social networking. They know we use email. I don't know of too many people that can block PowerPoint, Word, Excel, PDFs today in our business. We share information way too much in those 4 formats every day. But something as simple as, whenever you have Outlook Exchange, allowing your users to use HTML formatted email, and I'm not talking about Yahoo, Gmail, I'm talking about normal Outlook, that the rendering is in HTML, you will help a lot of that. Plain text RTF, the reason is, you know about the 0 frame size hrefs and stuff like that in a normal HTML. They can do that in an email that's HTML rendered. And if you have the preview pane open, where you're not even clicking on the email, you are executing that malcode without even opening the email. Something as simple as disallowing HTML formatted email will shrink that get in circle a little bit, because email is that primary way of executing. Can your emails be as pretty? No. But you can still limit and gain, you can make the user aware of what's occurring on his network better, because a plain text link won't execute when you click on it for the most part, or it'll say, click here, and then in brackets after it'll show you where it's actually taking you to. And if the domains don't match, you can start training and educating your users what to look for when you actually present it to them. And something as simple as that. All the other things you know about, blocking certain types of websites, certain types of traffic, things like that. Or limiting where you can go to get certain types of traffic. Because we still have to do our mission. Matt talked about cloud computing. Cloud computing may be the next way ahead, as long as its security is thought about as you're implementing it, not, we've got this, until you have your first event, which happens to a lot of things. You don't think about it till you actually have your first event. And by the way, I've learned through the Beltway politics is it ain't happening to me until it actually does. So that's the kind of stuff that push the best security practices and the risk management piece, the return on the investment, because it's hard to say why identity management, that's expensive. We all know PKI, those kind of authentication mechanisms are expensive. So how do I tell my CFO or whoever controls my budget that by doing this at this cost is really going to save me this much? Because you can't always articulate that. The hardest metrics to do are cybersecurity metrics. Proving that sometimes is harder than waiting till the first event happens and you go, see, I could have prevented that, but we actually want to prevent and not wait till it actually happened. So where are we going? I mentioned we're improving from a federal government perspective. We're improving our censoring capability. Einstein is probably one of the biggest things on not really U.S. CERT's perspective, because we're not doing the implementation, we're feeling the effects of the implementation, is the idea that Einstein 1 was a net flow based. We could do anomalous activity detection based on IPs, ports, protocols, but it was all retrospective because the data went to a database, we run scripts against it and go, oh, hey, this was happened. Or we know of an IP that's bad, we'll run a script to see, is that actual activity actually happening? So we're actually a little bit behind the power curve doing it. We're moving into the intrusion detection system world where we can actually write alerts based on intelligence, based on actual events, based on things we've learned through malware, reverse engineering, all those kind of things where we can actually write signatures. Now, the challenge we have at the federal enterprise level is how much packet capture we can do, and it gets dicey whenever we're starting to do packet capture to look for malware in email, because you got to capture more than just the header of the email. So now we don't want to be accused of reading anti-M's email that's coming into the federal government. So the privacy, civil rights, civil liberties, which is critical to our way of life, is one of the things that we are challenged with, because we have to be able to control the data that we look at in such a way that we can prove to our public that we are not intentionally reading their email, intentionally searching for their social security number or date of birth, that we are looking at ways to minimize that activity. And Einstein 2 has kind of opened that door. We're improving. The next stage that we're piloting and moving into is the intrusion prevention system capability. Actually being able to stop activity that we know shouldn't be happening. And we had a very successful pilot with one of the departments. And so now we're looking at the best way to move ahead on how we can do that and where those sensors sit. Are the sensors going to sit at the department agency point of presence? Are they going to sit in the not the figurative cloud, but the literal cloud at a internet service provider, where the internet service provider's point of presence is for that department of agency, or several departments and agencies. So doing a lot to change policy, change culture. We're trying to move ahead in large strides to do that, and those are our challenges. And state and local governments are just as important to us, that process, as the federal departments and agencies are. Now, the challenge is the White House, OMB, is saying, focus here, because we definitely don't have the greatest handle on the departments and agencies as they're starting to learn to share information. But we've got to, as a nation, share cybersecurity-related information across the board and be able to work together in helping, solve some of these problems for our public. And so, with that, here's how you can reach us. Don't ever hesitate to reach out to our Security Operations Center, and we will do what we can to help. I would always say, if it's a subcomponent or a more at the local level or some other level, please work at the state level. But I will never turn away a phone call. My watch will never turn away a phone call. And we will work with the multi-state ISAC, and we will work with the next level or two levels in the leadership at the state level as well. So with that, I open the floor to questions. I know it's close to lunch. I always get to lunch just before or just after lunch, everywhere I go. The hardest one, though, is speaking after Dale Myrose. If anybody knows former General Myrose from OD&I, that's an interesting challenge just because he's an excellent speaker. So he can capture an audience without notes or without slides. So it's a real fun challenge speaking after him. But I will do it again if I have to. Okay.
No questions?
I'm hearing food. That's what I'm hearing. I thought I heard some stomachs grumble.
Okay, well then we'll just wrap it up. I just want to thank the sponsors for the food that they have brought to the event. Again, Core Securities and Nexus, McAfee, Checkpoint, and TIBCO. I want to thank you, Randy Vickers.
My pleasure.
We have something over to your right.